All right, welcome to the All Access Entertainment Podcast. I'm your host, as always, Joseph Bruen. We have a very special guest this week, a man of many titles. I mean, he's been a producer, an author, of course, a promoter, and everything in between. Ladies and gentlemen, wrestling historian, Mr. Sheldon Goldberg.
Joe, it's great to be here. Great to see you, and looking forward to this.
Pleasure to have you here for sure, and looking forward to taking a little deep dive into your pro wrestling career and everything in between. Starting off, you grew up in the Boston area for part of your life, Mattapan to be exact,
Yep.
Massachusetts. And, growing up as a kid, why don't you tell us what it was like for you and when you first discovered pro wrestling?
Well, we didn't have much when I was a kid. I was a kind of a product of the era of television and a product of a vivid imagination. So I first saw pro wrestling on a black and white Philco television set in our living room, and was just fascinated by it. I thought it was like a comic book come to life, and became hooked on it in my early teen years. I'd say about 12, 13, I really started to get hooked on it, and had been a fan of it ever since. So.
And I know that you were a fan of comics, growing up. What were some of your favorite series?
I like both the DC and the Marvel stuff. I was a little more partial to the Marvel stuff. I just thought it was more interesting. The stories and the characters were a little more interesting than the DC characters.
And who are some of your favorite pro wrestlers growing up early on?
Well, obviously Bruno Sammartino. Bruno was tremendous. I remember Carl Gotch and Rene Goulet. They were a tag team, and Carl Gotch I thought was poetry in motion. I just thought he was the greatest thing I ever saw. Tony Marino is another one, an obscure one. He was great. Victor Rivera. Boy, I liked a lot of the bad guys: Bulldog Brower, the Blackjacks, Mulligan and Lanza, Kowalski, of course. So yeah, I mean, I was just into the whole thing.
And, coming out of school early on, you were heavily involved in local media, all different aspects of it. Why don't you tell us some of the projects you were a part of before the wrestling world?
Well, when I was in high school, I got a chance to be part of an Explorer program. I don't know if you know what that is. It's part of the Boy Scouts, where a company sponsors a program for teenage kids to learn about their industry. And I was fortunate enough to be in an Explorer program at Channel 7, which also has WRKO and WROR. And back in those days, TV and radio stations like that, especially in a big market like Boston, all kinds of people came through there. TV stars, movie stars, rock stars. It was just a parade of people. I actually had my first job at that place. I used to give tours of the station to nonprofit groups, and I got a chance to ingratiate myself to everybody and meet a lot of people, and that kind of opened a lot of doors for me, and opened up a lot of possibilities for the future. I mean, Boston's a big market. I wanted to be in broadcasting in the worst way, but because it's such a big market, normally if you want to make it in broadcasting, you start in a small market and you work your way up. But landing in a big market right away kind of made it a little difficult. So I didn't get that big broadcasting job that I was looking for, but I was able to do a lot of different things. I produced a pilot for a show for teenagers called Check It Out, created and produced that. That was right after high school, my first year in college. I did that. I got involved in a lot of different media projects. And in my frustration of trying to get a job in media, local broadcast media, I met a guy who was an actor, and he says, all these press people, you should try to do publicity for theater companies. And so I did that and became pretty successful at that, and then actually started to produce plays. First show I ever produced was just a show I created called Dance in the Street, which is one of the longest running musicals in Boston theater history. And that was a big one. And but coming into pro wrestling, I had a lot of experience doing a lot of different things. I had uh, while it wasn't wrestling experience per se, it was compatible experience. Pro wrestling, it's a show, you sell tickets to it. I had put on shows, sold tickets to them. So I had a leg up in an area where other people didn't have a leg up.
And that experience eventually got you linked in with the Boston Bad Boy, Tony Rumble, of course, the CWA, the Century Wrestling Alliance. What are your memories, your early memories of, well, first meeting Tony and linking up with that company and early memories of that company?
I met Tony in a very interesting way. I was publishing a newsletter called Matt Marketplace. It was for collectors of wrestling memorabilia. And I had a table at a convention in New York, John Arezzi's very first Weekend of Champions convention, which was a tremendous deal. It had Flair and Buddy Rogers and Bruno and Jushin Liger and all kinds of people. Kerry Von Erich showed up and Mick Foley. It was just a star-studded event. And this guy comes up to my table who I'd never met before, Tony Rumble. We started to chat. Turns out he grew up in the same town that I lived in, Roslindale, Massachusetts. I still live in Roslindale, just another part of it. But anyway, we became instant friends. He was fascinated by the stuff that I was saying. He invited me to have a table at his shows. And so in doing so, I said, well, what can I do for you? How can I help you? I ended up doing the company's website. It was the quote commissioner, unquote. And so we became very close and dear friends. And his death hit me very hard, and it still touches me to this day.
What do you think Tony Rumble's legacy is on not only wrestling as a whole, but the New England scene?
Well, Tony was, I think, in many ways, the greatest New England independent promoter that there was. Incredibly street smart. He had a passion for wrestling TV. He produced local television that nobody else was doing at the time. Tony was very, very street smart, as I said, very well connected throughout the wrestling industry because of his time with Mario Savoldi and the ICW promotion. A lot of people got their start and made headway because of Tony. People like Rick Fuller, the late Steve Bradley. Those guys. Steve Bradley got signed to the WWF developmental program, one of the first ones to get signed because of Tony Rumble. A lot of people don't know that, but Tony was the model that everybody tried to follow, and I was very fortunate to have been at his side for the last 6 or 8 years of his run.
When it comes to Superbad Steve Bradley, I mean, he's highly respected, one of the greats in ring to come out of New England. He was under developmental for probably about 5 years. It seemed longer than others. Why do you think it is that Steve never got his moment, never got that call up?
Well, there's a couple of reasons, and both have to do with physical issues. One is Steve was an asthmatic, and they were very afraid of him getting sick in the ring. That was one thing. The other thing is that during the course of his run in developmental, he wrecked his knee. And rather than have surgery, he felt that if he took time off to have surgery and get it fixed, he would lose his spot, which a lot of guys in that era had the same mindset. So he tried to work around it and tried to deal with it using painkillers, and got progressively more addicted to substances, and that was his ultimate undoing, unfortunately.
What would you say is the best advice that you personally have received in the wrestling world?
Hmm. Uh, Keep your mouth shut, your ears open, be a good listener, um, work hard, don't take anything for granted. You know, be respectful all the time of everybody that works for you, not just the wrestlers, but all the other people as well. I always try to be respectful of everyone. Um, I wanted to people to look at me as a genuine good guy, and just as somebody who was trying to do the best he could with what limited resources I had.
Yeah. And you mentioned the John Arezzi show, so that was in New York in 1990.
Hmm.
Now, at that era, you didn't see wrestling conventions or comic cons all over the place. It was not saturated by any means. So early on, was that the first event that you ever went to as far as conventions? And
Yes.
what are some of the other early ones that you went to?
I went to one in Nashville that was kind of fun. I would go any place. In that year, I was just discovering this stuff and networking with people. I was on the board of directors of the Cauliflower Alley Club for a number of years, and that met in Studio City, California, until they moved it to Vegas. But that was a phenomenal experience. I got a chance to break bread and get to know many, many legends, especially old timers, people that like the men that time forgot, people like Count Billy Varga and uh, um, oh gosh, so many. I just my flooding my head all at the same time. But yeah, I was very, very fortunate to be able to meet a lot of legends, Gene Kiniski. I met a lot of people like Antonio Pena, who was the founder of AAA, Antonio Inoki, Seiji Sakaguchi from New Japan. Um, just so many, and Hollywood people like Robert Forster, uh, Elliot Gould, all kinds of famous folks, and what a phenomenal experience. It's not the same now. It's more of a pro wrestling dominated, almost a fan fest, Cauliflower Alley Club, but it's worth going and worth being a part of. They do a lot of good work, so I'm proud to be a part of it.
So that was one of my next questions, actually. So when it comes to CAC, why don't you, for the fans that don't know, why don't you tell us a little bit about what CAC is all about, what they do for, injured wrestlers or whatever it may be,
Sure.
and maybe you have a personal story from one of your early CACs, anything that stands out.
Yeah, the Cauliflower Alley Club was uh, started in California in the 60s by Mike Mazurki, who was a character actor who was also a wrestler. He was a wrestler before he became a character actor. He was very well connected in Hollywood. He had a restaurant, and every once a week they would get his friends together from the Fight Game and the Hollywood folks and so forth, and they'd have a luncheon. And they would do good deeds for people. For example, when Haystack Calhoun passed away, there was no money to bury him. So these guys got together and they pooled their money, and they paid for Haystack Calhoun's funeral. And eventually it became a nonprofit organization. And they had an annual banquet at the Sportsman's Lodge in Studio City, California. And money was raised to assist pro wrestlers and boxers and people in the fight game in need, as well as giving scholarships to deserving young athletes. So I was approached by a gentleman named Carl Lauer, who was an executive with Cauliflower Alley Club, to join the board of directors, because at that point in time, the membership was aging out, and they wanted to get more younger people involved in the club to sustain it. So that was the impetus for recruiting me to the board, and it was just such a privilege, I get a chance to rub shoulders with so many people, and got a chance to do some great things. Tom Burke and I organized a Cauliflower Alley Club reunion in Springfield, Massachusetts. There were several in New York at LaGuardia that were put together by George Napolitano. We had everybody from Vince McMahon to, of course, Lou Thez was the president for a while. Meeting and getting to know Lou Thez was a great honor and a great privilege. He was a great man. He was one of those people, Joe, that when he walked into a room, you knew you were in the presence of somebody special.
Yeah.
And the other thing about Lou was he was very generous with his time and very generous with his experiences. Ask him about anything or anyone, and he was just a wealth of knowledge because he had been at the top of the business through several eras. And all the things that he saw and the things that he knew were just a treasure trove of knowledge. And I'll never forget the guy. He was just a fantastic human being.
Now, when it comes to heels, faces, do you have a preference? As a promoter, if you're putting together a show or even growing up as a fan, which side did you go for?
Well, I think as a kid, I went for the babyface side, but as a promoter, it's the heels that draw the money. So, great heels, especially today, are so hard to find. You don't have the guys. That menace is missing from pro
Right.
wrestling. I think that the business is poorer because of it. So, yeah, as a kid, I was a gigantic Bruno fan. Bruno was like a superhero. He was, the embodiment of the Charles Atlas story. The 98-pound weakling becoming one of the strongest men in the world, and just the idol of millions, literally.
Yeah. Now, I feel like when it comes to managerial duties, 80s, 90s, and even prior to that, Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, Classy Freddie Blassie, Captain Lou, the Grand Wizard, all these larger than life, colorful characters. I feel like it's a lost art. I mean, there are still managers today, but it isn't, in my opinion, what it once was. What's your take on the managerial role and how it's kind of transpired into today's wrestling?
Well, the managerial role was largely for guys who couldn't talk. You had my first vivid memory of a manager was Lou Albano managing Crusher Verdue, who couldn't put 5 words together. And Lou had such this huge personality that he was able to get guys over, and Lou was just really a phenomenal manager. Of course, Freddie Blassie was a great talker, was a great wrestler in his day. In later years, you got Jim Cornette, who was fantastic, Bobby Heenan, of course. And after that, it kind of falls off. Gary Hart was a phenomenal manager, a very different style than the others. But in the modern day, I was very lucky in promoting NECW. We had a fellow by the name of Sean Gorman, who was really, really fantastic. As you probably remember, he managed DC Dillinger and Eddie Edwards, who were Sabotage. And those guys really, DC especially, really didn't need a mouthpiece. But Gorman was just like that special sauce that held the whole thing together. And anybody that he was paired with became better because of it. So to me, Sean Gorman was the last of the great managers on the independent scene. I don't see anybody today that really feel, because it's a skip generation. This generation of people really hasn't seen managers like Albano and the Grand Wizard and Blassie and all that. They don't have that experience, so you don't see that on the independent scene very much. So I think Gorman was the state of the art as far as managers go in this era of pro wrestling.
And you mentioned DC Dillinger. We lost him too soon. He is truly, it might be safe to say that he was the greatest heel of New England Championship Wrestling. its history and of New England period.
Hmm.
DC Dillinger was certainly at the top of that mountain. Why don't you just tell us a little bit more about DC, how he was behind the scenes, and how prominent he was as a heel?
To me, DC was just, first of all, what you saw, that was his personality. I mean, I personally loved the kid to death. I just thought he was great. And I really believed in him. I thought he was somebody that really just all he needed was that moment in the spotlight, and he could take over, which he did. When I merged with the PWF guys, there were only three people that I wanted to take over with me, and that was DC Dillinger, Eddie Edwards, and Alex Arion. Anybody else didn't make a difference. Those guys to me were the difference makers, and DC was a genuine difference maker. I don't think anyone can question the fact that DC Dillinger on top of New England Championship Wrestling, he was box office, no question about it.
And speaking of New England Championship Wrestling, you had such a long, successful run with that company. Why don't you tell us how that started for you? How you decided, well, you know what, now it's time to become a promoter and do that sort of thing. Yeah, tell us all about how it began.
Well, after Tony Rumble passed away suddenly in November of 1999, I was a little bit lost. I didn't see NWA New England going in a direction that I thought was going to be successful. And my friend Scott Dickinson had said, well, maybe you ought to start something else. And, it was one of those moments where if I didn't do it, I would always wonder what would have happened if I did. And so I did. And I started New England Championship Wrestling. It was August of 2000. And it took a good several years for me to get my legs under me in terms of, becoming a wrestling promoter. Like I say, I knew how to market things. I knew how to publicize things and so forth. And, but, dealing with the wrestling part of the wrestling business was new to me. Even though I've been close to Tony Rumble, I mean, I wasn't doing booking or anything like that. I mean, we might have talked about booking and things of that nature, but I was never really directly involved, only peripherally. If my opinion was asked for, I would give it, but that was about it. But it all worked out. It was a rocky road. It had its ups and downs, but I was very fortunate to come along at a time when independent wrestling as a thing was just getting started. Like what we know today is independent wrestling. There was independent wrestling before me, way before me, but this era of what we call independent wrestling now was really at its beginnings around 2000 when the territories had really kind of disappeared, and that gap that was left in the wrestling business from the absence of the spot show that was being filled by independent promoters, that was just starting to come into being. And there were only a handful of independent promoters at the time. There was Dennis Corluzzo, there was ECWA, of course, Joe Eugenio, but there were only a handful. And so it was a new thing and a new business. And my approach to it was to market it and promote it differently to more of a mainstream audience than the guys who were just promoting to just quote wrestling people. So my vision for NECW was to, get it in the newspapers, get it in media, and really kind of draw people on a broader basis by publicizing it and marketing it to a wider audience. And I was very fortunate to have been able to do that. We had very early on when we were running shows at Good Time Emporium in Somerville, Massachusetts, long gone but not forgotten. I was very fortunate to have Budweiser as a sponsor, and through them got some media deals, got some good media coverage. I was able to get stories about us in various newspapers, including the Globe and the Herald. We had several front pages over the years. So NECW is a very well marketed and well publicized company that other companies were not. Whatever they brought to the table wrestling wise, we had something that they didn't, and that is that we were a company that was marketed in a way that people knew. Oh yeah, I saw an article about them. So we had a leg up in a lot of ways.
I remember that day, August of 2000. I was there for the inaugural event, and it had a special feel to it. I was doing some interviews for my Cox Cable talk show at the time, and you could just feel it. It was the presence of things to come, and it was nice. You had a lot of great talents there with Bob Evans and Maverick Wild, and it was Alex Arion. So it was nice to see, and nice to see how far it went. So congrats on that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Very proud of it.
You talk about Antonio Inoki. You mentioned him a little while back. You were very influential when it comes to having that relationship with some of the Japanese talent and getting them specifically into the New England area, and also into World Wrestling Federation and beyond. So why don't you tell us about how you started that relationship with the Japanese talents?
Wow. Well, I have to give credit to my good friend Shun Yamaguchi, who back in those days was a photographer for Gong magazine, the Japanese magazines. But Shun lives in America. He actually lives in Arlington, Massachusetts. He now, of course, is the Japanese voice of WWE TV. He's the Japanese announcer along with Funaki. But the first person that Shun brought to my attention as a promoter was Sumi Sakai. Sumi had been a star in Japan, and her dream was to wrestle and to live in America. And so he asked me if I would book her and get her booked in different places. And so I readily agreed, and she had a big impact. I think when people saw this little Japanese girl and all the photographers around the ring, and so for people knew they were seeing something special. They didn't quite know what they were seeing, but they knew it was something special and something different. And she had a very short run of a few months with us. What I was able to do is when you come to Japan from Japan to America on a tourist visa, it lasts for 3 months. So after 3 months, you have to go back to your home country. So what I did was I got her booked with a friend of mine by the name of Ron Hutchinson, who ran an independent promotion in Canada. He also trained Trish Stratus and Edge and Christian and Test and a whole bunch of other greats. Ron was running in Toronto. So I sent Sumi up to Toronto to work for him. And of course, when you leave the country and come back in, the 3 months starts all over again. So she was able to stay longer, and eventually got a visa, came to America, and stayed, and had a phenomenal career, became Ring of Honor World Champion. And she's a rather remarkable story of how she was a star already in Japan and then just made a whole new career in the United States, bit by bit, piece by piece. So that was her. I was the one who brought the Michinoku Pro wrestlers into ECW and then into WWE. As I mentioned before, I was publishing a newsletter called Matt Marketplace, and people would write to me and ask me, well, can you get me stuff from this or that, or from Mexico, or from All Japan or New Japan? And one of the companies that was particularly kind of developing a cult following at the time was Michinoku Pro Wrestling, which was kind of a lucha-style Japanese company. And I wrote to them and got an answer back from a guy in the office who happened to be coming to the United States, and we met, and I brought him to an ECW show, which was the night of the mass transit incident, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
Of all the things all the things to see. So after the show, I introduced him to Paul Heyman, and Paul invited the company to send a match for the first pay-per-view, Barely Legal. And I ended up becoming the broker between the two of them, between Michinoku Pro Wrestling and ECW. And that obviously worked out. That Michinoku Pro match on the first ECW Barely Legal pay-per-view was considered a match of the year by a lot of people, and really blew the door open for Michinoku Pro Wrestling in the United States. They asked me to arrange a meeting with WWF, and I did. I took the Great Suzuki up to Stamford the day after the Barely Legal pay-per-view, and we met with Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard, and that eventually led to a deal between Michinoku and WWE, and they kicked Suzuki out of the deal and kept his top guys, and that's how Kaientai got into WWF, which is sort of the capsule version of a much longer story.
Well, why is that? Why was Sasuke out of there?
He thought he was the second coming of Antonio Inoki, and they did not like his attitude. They thought he was cocky. I think that Suzuki was really a little bit misunderstood. Like, he was telling people in Japanese press that he was going to be the first WWE light heavyweight champion and all this, and they were like, well, that's not going to happen, and blah, blah, blah. Well, what he was doing was just hyping himself up. Like, if they're having a tournament for a light and you're in it, you're going to tell people you're going to win it. You're not going to tell people you're going to lose.
Right.
So I think they kind of misunderstood him, and they brought Victor Quinones in to actually finish up the deal. And Victor and Suzuki really didn't get along, so he was kind of cast aside. And Taka Michinoku and Dick Togo and Funaki, they were the ones that ended up being the beneficiaries of WWE's largesse.
You mentioned when promoting an ECW, like any promotion, there could be ups and downs, the rocky road here and there as a promoter. And as a promoter, your personal experience, what would you say has been your greatest challenge?
Oh boy, greatest challenge easily is just trying to do things on a small or even no existence budget. I never really had great financial backing. I had to scrape and claw and scratch and put things together with scotch tape and rubber bands and shoelaces and stuff like that. So managing to keep it all going while having a regular job and trying to live a life, that was the biggest challenge. The fact that I was able to last over 20 years, I think, is a testament to my stick-to-itiveness and my intent on making something of it. I didn't want to quit. I didn't want to give up on it. And so, we managed to accomplish a lot of things. We had a couple of runs on TV, and very, very proud of the legacy of New England Championship Wrestling. And our YouTube channel still gets thousands of views every month of people who look at the old shows, the old footage, and the collections of matches that I've put up there. I'm especially proud of a playlist called the New England Championship Wrestling 20th Anniversary Collection. I really wanted to do a big show for our 20th anniversary, but it was in the middle of the pandemic and we couldn't do it. So what I did was I went through the archives and called what I thought were 20 matches that represented 20 years of New England Championship Wrestling, put them up for free on YouTube as a playlist, and I'm very, very proud of all that stuff. There's a lot of great stuff, a lot of stars before they became famous, a lot of foreign stars, Sumi, of course, Doug Williams from New England, and it's just a terrific collection that shows the depth and breadth of the talent that came through NECW in that 20-year period, which I think that those matches stand by themselves as a tremendous legacy.
Why don't you tell us about that special event that you had you actually had a theater, a very unique situation. You rented out a theater and had a special NECW viewing there.
Yeah, we put together a compilation called New England Championship Wrestling: The Lost Matches, and that's exactly what it was. It's matches that were not online, not available on YouTube, and some of them had never even been released before. And so we put them together in a collection, and we showed them in a theater to a live audience with a Q&A afterwards. And while it wasn't especially well attended, I was very proud of it. I thought it was great. We're going to do another one sometime in the next 6 or 8 months,
Oh,
and it just gives me a chance to keep the brand name out there, but also to kind of give people a taste of the history and the legacy of New England Championship Wrestling through these lost matches.
yeah.
So I thought it was a cool concept, and I'm looking forward to doing another one.
You've had so many talents over the years work for NECW, and some went on to some real big things, whether it be Beth Phoenix or Frankie Kazarian, or, of course, Prototype, who became John Cena. And speaking
Mm-hmm.
of John Cena, his retirement tour, hanging it up 2025. Who do you think will be that next John Cena? Do you think there is somebody in the business now that is going to be that next A-level guy?
It's very difficult to say, and you almost can't say, because now it's so arbitrary how they push people and how people are programmed. It's different than how it used to be. It's very difficult for a guy or a girl to get themselves over organically. It's not as easy because everything is so written and produced and homogenized and pasteurized and sanitized. It's not like it used to be, where you got out there, you got promo time, and you had a chance to capture people's imagination. Now everything is so written out and produced, it's very difficult for people to do that, almost impossible. So I really can't say. That's a hard thing to talk about. I think there's a lot of interesting talent that's coming up in New England right now. I think New England is I see the independent scene here, and there's so many little companies that have popped up, and so many shows, and so many, you see the same faces on a lot of these shows over and over again. Um, I think that independent wrestling is the last great hope of professional wrestling. It's become such a corporate business that I think it's lost the charm and the grit that the pro wrestling that we grew up with had. So support your independence, and cheer that next group of people on.
So I was at a show early on with John Cena. He was Prototype. He was with UPW at the time. Came out to the New England area probably around the same time, 2000 era. And
Hmm.
at this point, the UPW documentary or special had already aired. So everybody kind of knew who he was. And he was just still at that point very humble. I remember him helping set up all the chairs for the event, and he didn't have to do that, where a lot of other people were just kind of hanging out backstage, where he was out there and getting it done. What was your personal experience with John for NECW?
There's a great story in that. Uh, I have a friend by the name of Steve King, was a local wrestler, Strangler Steve King. You may remember him.
Yes.
Steve knew John, and he knew Frankie Kazarian. They were all good friends. And he was the one that asked me to book him, that he was coming home to New England to get his things, because he was about to report to Louisville and OVW. He was going from UPW in California to OVW in Louisville. And so he asked if I would, give him a match. And I said I certainly would. No problem. Be more than happy to. And he was coming with Frankie Kazarian. And I said, well, why don't they work against each other? They're familiar with each other. They're friends. That's the easiest thing to do, rather than put him with somebody he doesn't know. So it was just common sense.
Yeah.
So I get an email, from John, and he says, "Mr. Goldberg, I want to thank you. I understand I'm booked on your show on whatever the date was. I forget the exact date." He says, I'm wrestling the future Frankie Kazarian. I promise you it's going to be a good match. I promise I won't let you down." It was such a cool thing for this kid to write to me and to say, and I never forgot that. I just thought, what a classy thing to do. Just he so impressed me as a person, and I tell people to this day it was the best $100 I ever spent in the wrestling business.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Not going to get him for $100 anymore, right?
No.
So yeah, John Cena. I mean, he seems like he's still carried that on, and he's still very humble and very appreciative for what's given to him. So it's good to see.
Tremendous work ethic.
Yeah.
Great family too.
Now, it may be difficult to choose, but if you were put to the test, who is your Mount Rushmore of NECW, male or female? Top 4 talents of the entire run.
DC Dillinger, Eddie Edwards, Alex Arion, Alexis Nevaeh.
Can't go wrong with that. That's fantastic. Now, you talked about your radio. You've done a lot of stuff on radio over the years. Let's talk specifically about Mouthpiece and how that came about. Was that you and Joe Matarazzo?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, tell us about that.
I had been approached by a guy by the name of Mike Wynn, who at the time was the general manager of 1510 The Zone, to do a pro wrestling talk show. They were looking to add that to their lineup. They were a 50,000 watt station, but it really, because of the signal, it wasn't really a big powerhouse in Boston radio. So they tried to create kind of unique programs to attract a niche audience. And so I was approached to do a pilot for a pro wrestling show. And I did it with a fellow who writes a lot of newspaper stuff and is a radio guy down in Fall River by the name of Tim Weisberg. I don't know if you're familiar with Tim Weisberg.
Yep.
But yeah, so Tim and I did this pilot, and they liked it, and they wanted to give it the green light, and Tim kind of fell out of it somehow. I don't remember what all that was. It was nothing negative, but anyway, I was talking with Mike about how we were going to launch this, and at the time Hurricane Katrina had happened, and I said, well, why don't we do an event where we do a live radio broadcast of a wrestling card, live, radio play-by-play, and we'll use this as a vehicle to kind of launch this pro wrestling talk show. And so we were set to do this, and in the course of this, Mike Wynn, the general manager, had left the station. So the new guy that took over had no idea about anything of this and didn't want to do it, wanted to get out of it. And I went down to the place and I forced the issue because we had already advertised it, we had already promoted it, and so forth. And the guy's name, the general manager, was a fellow by the name of Anthony Pepe. And I really fought him hard on it, and we eventually did that special show. But the talk show kind of went away for a while until Anthony came back to me and asked me if we would provide a wrestling event for the Hot Dog Safari, which is a big charity event that was put together by Eddie Andelman. He had done it for a number of years, where they get all these people that sell hot dogs and they give them away for free, and the money goes to cystic fibrosis research. So in the course of all this, Anthony says, "Hey, listen, I'm doing this, putting together this block of radio shows with an hour of boxing, an hour of MMA, and an hour of wrestling, and I want you to do the hour of wrestling." He had seen me on the A&E special, The Unreal Story of Professional Wrestling, and said, that's my guy. I want him to do that. So that's how that all came about. And we had a 3-year run with the show, and it was literally the most popular show on the radio station. They used to do a live stream of the show while we were doing it, and literally we crashed the server numerous times because so many people were trying to get in and listen.
Wow.
But it was a wonderful experience. The show was actually syndicated in a number of markets before it went off the air. So it was a phenomenal experience. Joe Matarazzo and Mike Johnson would join us every week from PW Insider.
Oh, yeah.
So it was great.
Now,
Fantastic experience.
a two-sided question for you. So, was there ever somebody, a talent that maybe you thought had everything it took to become a star, and for whatever reason, never took off? And then on the other side of that, somebody maybe you didn't see that in them, and they went on to become a star.
The guy that I thought deserved better in wrestling than he got, he's still wrestling today, Scott Levesque.
Yes.
Scott Levesque had everything. He had size, he had the look, passion for pro wrestling. What Scott lacked was self-confidence. And you can't give somebody self-confidence. I mean, you can encourage them as much as you want to. I thought he was great. I just, we had paired him with a girl named Sammy Lane, and unfortunately, as hard as they tried, there was no chemistry between them. But he's the guy that I thought deserved better. I thought Maverick Wild as NECW champion could have been booked better, but Bob Evans was booking at the time and did not book him very well, and really he never got the traction that he should have had. He was in my opinion, a great champion as far as in the ring goes, but never really lived up to his potential because of the way he was booked. I always wanted a second chance with him, but it for one reason or another didn't take place. As far as somebody who I didn't think was going to make it, who did, Max Bauer.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I mean, Max was great. I mean, he was a good big draw and all that, but he wasn't a good businessman. I won't go into that story, but I didn't think Max had the business smarts, the street smarts to be able to cut it business-wise. He did get into NXT. He did have a deal for a while. Unfortunately, injuries derailed his career. But I didn't think Max was going to make that leap, and to his credit, he did.
So peeling back the curtain a little bit as a promoter, when you're putting together a program, which is, for fans that don't know, a series of matches, a feud, whole story all the way through, what does that look like for you as the promoter, putting together a program? Kind of walk us through that process.
Well, I think the first thing you do is you look at who is compatible with each other, which guys, and sometimes the guys themselves make those suggestions. I was always a guy who liked to ask talent what they wanted to do, how they saw themselves, and work together with them. I always want to, because once you do that, then the guys own it, and they bring more to it. So that was my mindset. That was my philosophy. I'll give you one example of a program that was generated by the guys themselves, and it was a program in NECW between Alex Arion and Max Bauer. Those two guys wanted to do that program, and it was phenomenal. Arion was such a great talent. He was he was short in stature, and that was the knock on him, that he was just too short to be a big-time guy. But he had that knack of being able to have a credible match with anyone, no matter how big they were or small they were. Max Bauer was like a foot and a half taller than he was, yet they had these incredible, believable matches that really set the fans on the edge of their seats. So that was a situation where, again, the talent themselves came up with the programs or the ideas, and then we just programmed that out over a series of months to get to to get to a finish, to get to a blow off. So that's basically how it works.
And if you could also explain to the fans kind of what the difference is between a regular traditional show and a sold show in pro wrestling.
Sold show is basically bought by an organization. It might be a school, it might be a Cub Scout troop, and basically they buy the show for a set price, and then all the ticket proceeds go to them. And we as a company help them promote that show. We provide the posters, we provide the tickets, we provide, in our case, all the social media and press releases and publicity and all those sorts of things. And it works as a fundraiser for that group or organization. That's what a sold show is.
And a good friend of yours, great part of NECW over the years. Why don't you tell us about your friendship with Paul Richard?
Paul Richard is someone that I knew for many years. He, of course, worked as a referee for WWF for years and then became the local promoter for ECW. He was my entree into ECW, which enabled me to hook up the Michinoku guys to ECW. And later, Paul became general manager of New England Championship Wrestling. Did a fantastic job. He was the one that really opened the door for our first TV deal with Comcast Sportsnet. And later on, just continued on in the general manager role with NECW when we had our second TV deal with WMFP. And Paul was just a great help. He was a great in-ring presence and a great behind-the-scenes presence as well.
Certainly a great part of wrestling as a whole, but especially here in New England.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it had a very profound impact on pro wrestling in New England.
Now, for you as a promoter, it didn't end with NECW. You went on to Triple W as well and kind of implementing that into your recipe. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, I just thought that women's wrestling got the short shrift in New England. You'd see one match on a card, and I always thought to myself, why can't we do the same things with women that we do with men? And there was when I started World Women's Wrestling, it was at a time where there were a lot of girls who were getting into the business, and this was because of Lita. Lita was a very, very big influence on girls getting into pro wrestling. And so there were enough girls pretty much to start a company, and with some additions from the outside, from New York and New Jersey and all that. And so I just thought that would be a draw. It would be a novelty that would draw people. We did a couple of all women shows under the NECW name, and they showed a lot of promise and a lot of potential, and they drew pretty well. They drew actually better than what we were drawing with the guys at the time. And so, but I felt that to really make it work, it had to be its own brand and its own thing. So that's how I came up with the World Women's Wrestling name, and launched it as its own separate thing. And it had a good and very interesting run. We sold a lot of DVDs with it. It attracted a lot of attention. We had a lot of great media on that. I mean, we did some phenomenal media. We actually were, on Maddie in the Morning, stuff that wrestling companies never got. Not even WWE would get somebody on Maddie in the Morning. We got that. There was a huge article about us in the Globe. It was actually they did a teaser pilot for a show for the Oxygen Network based on our little promotion, and didn't go anywhere. But nonetheless, it was something interesting. That's also in that I believe in that NECW Legendary compilation on YouTube. You can check that out. There's the NECW Legendary, and there's the NECW 20th Anniversary Collection. There are two playlists that have a lot of classic matches on it, and that pilot is there that you can see. So it's pretty interesting. So yeah, got a lot of attention, and I just think that the guys that I was in business with at the time didn't want to make the financial commitment to really go all the way with it. It could have been as big as Shimmer, but they just didn't want to commit the resources to it.
So when it comes to kind of the complete package of a pro wrestler, what is the recipe that gets you there?
Well, obviously, it starts with athleticism, the ability to be coachable, uh, something that can't be taught, which is charisma, uh, promo ability that ties into charisma. That those two things are intertwined. That's really the total package. If you have that ability to reach people and touch people, that's your golden ticket. Not a lot of guys or girls have that, unfortunately. It's not something that can be taught. It's something that if it's in you, it can be brought out, but it can't be taught. You can't be coached for it. It has to live within you.
Now, all the events that you've run, whether it be Triple W or NECW, if you had to pick one, what would that number one event be? Your personal favorite over the years?
Boy,
Anything stand out?
we did a couple of our Iron 8 tournaments that we did. One in 2009 where Harley Race was our guest. He presented the trophy at the end. That was a phenomenal event. And then some years later, we had an Iron 8 tournament up in Beverly where Brad Hollister won the NECW Heavyweight Championship that night. That's out on a DVD. And that was a terrific top to bottom event that was sold out. And it was one of those things that really, a lot of people said it was like one of the best live events they'd ever seen. So, I was very proud. I tried to come up with things that set us apart. So this was at a time when Ring of Honor was really tearing it up. And I wanted to give us a signature event like a Royal Rumble or a Survivor Series, something that would be NECW's signature. And so one year we had it in our anniversary show, which is called Birthday Bash. Kevin Kelly was booking at the time, the announcer Kevin Kelly. And he came up with the idea of a 4-way 45-minute Iron Man match. And the match got over so well that I said, what, this could be something that could be our signature event, but not as it is. We could make it a tournament with that 4-way being the climax of it. So I came up with the idea of the Iron 8 guys, 4 singles matches. The winners meet in a 4-way 45-minute Iron Man match. That's how the Iron 8 came to be. And that served us in good stead over the years. And that was something that really, was a landmark event for us. I'd like to bring that back as a special thing every now and then.
Yeah.
So that's a possibility, working with somebody else in the future.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah.
Well, two of my favorite venues when it comes to New England Championship Wrestling, the AmeriCal Civic Center, Wakefield, Massachusetts, and of course the Good Time Emporium, which no longer exists, but they're in Somerville, Massachusetts. Any personal memories from those two venues?
Oh gosh, Good Times was special. We started actually in Connecticut. The first event we ever had was in Connecticut, in a town called Wethersfield, at a place called the Fun Zone, which no longer exists. It was a venue very similar to Good Times, but smaller. And it was perfect for what we were trying to do. I was able to get us into Good Times because I had a good relationship with the management there. And it kind of clicked right away. We were drawing a pretty decent audience and bringing a lot of interesting talent in the very beginning into that place. The thing about Good Times wasn't the venue itself so much as who wrestled there. If you look through the matches and who wrestled there, people like John Cena, Sumi Sakai making her American debut, Beth Phoenix, Trinity, who wrestled for the rebooted ECW and wrestled for TNA, had her very first singles match there. Um, uh, Frankie Kazarian, there's Doug Williams. Um, wow, I mean, just phenomenal talent. Johnny Storm versus Jody Fleisch, two guys from England, had a phenomenal match at Good Time. Like, you never knew what you were going to see. It
Yeah.
was the fans were discovering this along with us, and that was the excitement and uh, the thrill of it. I think if you went to those shows, you most likely saw something special.
And from your inner fan, what is your favorite era in pro wrestling, whether it be rock and wrestling, the 80s boom, the new generation in the 90s, of course, the Attitude Era, or, present day or ruthless aggression era?
Man, I like the 70s.
Okay.
I like that territory era of the 70s. Wrestling was such a patchwork quilt of stuff. It was different. It was, I've become in my old age a real mark for 70s wrestling magazines. Just because you saw guys from different territories you didn't see on your local TV, the crazy stories that they would make up and stuff. It was just so colorful that the 80s kind of corporatized it and homogenized it a little bit, but that 70s era really set the table for everything that came after it, and it was just interesting and exciting and quirky and unique all at the same time.
Now, all the things that you've done in this business, if you had to pick one, what would your greatest accomplishment be, in your opinion?
Gosh, that's so very hard to say. It's like asking me which child I like
Right.
best. um No, I really can't pick. They're all very special experiences. I was very fortunate that I was able to have such a varied career and had the ability to do different things and work with people and see them, realize what they were trying to do in life and in the business. It's not just what I did; it's what I helped other people to do. I think that's the biggest thrill to me is to see people, realize their potential because of something that I did. But the second part of that, I think, is that you know, that I've been writing books lately. I've got 4 books in print,
Oh,
believe it or
yes.
not. And yeah, I knew you were probably going to get to that at some point, and
Oh,
I'm
that's
sorry
okay.
if I pulled the rug out from under you there. But it's a very different kind of satisfaction. Um, I've had some health issues over the last few years. A few years ago, my kidneys failed. I'm a dialysis patient trying to get a kidney transplant, and I needed to find a new creative outlet. I had to retire from my regular job just because the dialysis process, which is like 12 hours a week on top of a regular job, was just physically too much. So I needed another creative outlet. I'd always wanted to write a book. I know many people that have written books. I've been written about in many books. And so I decided to take a stab at it and came out with a novel called The Last Fall, which little product placement here.
Yes.
You can see that. Yeah. And so I wrote this book, and it was so well received and so warmly embraced by people. It kind of took me aback, and it gave me a very different kind of satisfaction because when you produce a play or when you promote wrestling, you may be the person behind it, but it's who's in the ring or on the stage that's the physical representation of it. With a book, it's different. A book is just you. You write the words, you put it out there, that's you. And so for people to embrace that and rave about it, it's a different kind of satisfaction, and it's really energized me and given me a kind of a very unexpected third act, if you will. in my life, and I'm very, very grateful for it.
And the last fall was a great success, and you went on, of course, to do After the Bell and A Mad Dog's Tale. Of course, The Family Business is the next one up. So, kind of walk us through that process. What can fans expect out of these books?
Well, the last fall is takes place between 1971 and 1999. It's the story of a guy who literally stumbles into the wrestling business as a kid at the age of 11 and comes up through the business. It's about his highs and lows against the backdrop of a changing industry. It's a fun book. It's an interesting book. It's all fictionalized, so it's not. It weaves fact with fiction in an interesting way, and people have really taken to it. They really, really enjoy it. Even non-fans, women particularly, enjoy this book, which is something that surprised me. The book was so successful that I was convinced by a mutual friend of ours, Stephen DeAngelis,
Oh, yes.
to write a sequel. And so After the Bell takes place 17 and a half years later, where the main character, Rick, is now the co-owner of Great Western Wrestling, the promotion in Montana. It's now he's got a very different set of responsibilities. He's not just a guy trying to work his way through the wrestling business. He's now the boss. He now has to bring along another generation of wrestling stars. He's a father and a husband and has to negotiate family life. And it continues his story in an interesting way, again, against the backdrop of the wrestling business becoming increasingly more corporate. A spin-off of that book was written right after that, called A Mad Dog's Tale. It's the story of a wrestler, a guy from a very prominent Jewish family in Marblehead, Massachusetts, named Michael Morrison, nicknamed Mad Dog. And it follows him through being a bullied kid to discovering amateur wrestling, to going to the Olympics, to being recruited into pro wrestling, all the while trying to live up to the legacy that his family has of running a very successful business empire and him being a part of that. So that's A Mad Dog's Tale. Very, very proud of that book. And The Family Business, which is the latest book, is another sequel to The Last Fall and After the Bell, which now focuses on the legacy of second generation wrestlers. It kind of lets me explore a corner of the wrestling business that I wasn't able to explore in the previous books. So again, it takes you to a place in pro wrestling that people seldom go, and it was a fun book to write. All of them were fun books to write, and people get engaged in the characters, and I've they talk to me all the time. Those characters, they just keep yakking at me. There's yet another sequel in the works, the last one, which is going to be called The Warmth of the Sun. And it's all about the relationship between Rick, the main character of the previous books, and Ray Perlman, the billionaire owner of the Mega Lith American Championship Wrestling and American Marketing Industries. So it examines their relationship, their unique relationship, and talks about everybody has to give up at some point and move on. So it's about succession, amongst other things. So again, I really enjoy writing these books. I really enjoy the fans' feedback. It is very, very rewarding. And I hope you can get the books on Amazon. You can also go to NECW TV/shop and get an autographed copy. And I hope you get them, and I hope you enjoy them.
Excellent. Now, you said that this next one will be the last book of those characters. Are you planning on writing more in the future on other stories, other characters?
Yeah, I've been wanting to do an autobiography, and I'm going to tackle that at some point. Uh, so that's on the list, and then maybe something completely different. So again, I discovered that I could do this. I never thought I could write a book. I thought, I've written articles, I've written for magazines, I've of course written press releases and programs and that sort of thing. I never thought I could write a book until I actually sat down and
Right.
did it. I was laying in a hospital bed at Mass General. I was there for about a month, and I said to myself, this can't be the end of my creative life. I've got to figure out what it is I can do, and then try to do that. And so once I had recovered enough and kind of got my legs under me, so to speak, I said, well, let me try this. I've got some ideas. Let me give this a shot and see, where it can go. And out came the last. I actually wrote the first draft of the last fall in 3 weeks.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah, yeah, just kind of poured
It's
out of me.
impressive.
Yeah, crazy.
Now, when it comes to fan interactions, is there one that comes to mind? Maybe your favorite fan interaction over the years?
Oh man, I love the fans. I didn't, I would be the guy that would stand at the door and help tear tickets and shake people's hands and welcome them, or when they came left, I would be back at the door thanking them for coming and hope that they come again and all that. I always had an appreciation because that's your audience. Those are the people that are buying
Yeah.
tickets. If you're not nice to them, they won't come back. It didn't make any sense to me for guys to be calling the people marks and looking down at them like they were a lesser form of life. I was in business with people who were like that. I couldn't understand that at all. You're just taking a dump where you eat when you
Yeah.
do that. I mean, I just genuinely appreciated people showing up and spending their money, and but my favorite fan interactions of late have been book signings. I just did one this past Sunday, and I get a chance to sit and chat with people and talk to them and answer their questions about the books or NECW or any of the other stuff that I've done, and it's just so rewarding that people still remember and that they're still interested and engaged in what it is that I'm putting out. And that's the ultimate reward for me. I always said that once my health started to decline and I wasn't able to have the stamina to promote live events anymore, that I just didn't want to be forgotten. I didn't want everything that I had done previously to just slip away. I wanted to. That's the reason for the lost matches. It's the reason for the books. And I just find that any interaction with fans now is more rewarding than the interaction in the past because there's a greater value placed on it. That these people remember, these people didn't forget me. These people are still engaged in the things that I'm doing, and I'm just incredibly grateful for that.
And why don't you tell us your website address again, where fans can follow you on social media and YouTube? Include that as well.
Okay, well, you can follow me on Facebook under my name, Sheldon Goldberg. There's also an NECW wrestling page for we post a lot of old shows and matches and things like that on there, and also promote all my book signing events and things related to the books that I'm writing and publishing. Um, you can also go to the YouTube channel, which is NECW Wrestling, youtube.com/NECW Wrestling, two W's there. Um, on X at NECW, I'm on Blue Sky as Sheldon Goldberg. I'm on Instagram as Sheldon Goldberg 311. How that 311 got there, I have no idea. They just put it on there. And that's pretty much it. I'm not on TikTok, but every place else. So I hope you'll seek me out, follow my posts, uh, video stories, book signings, things of that nature. And I look forward to seeing folks, shaking your hand, and having some fun interaction.
And as we wind down here towards the end, you have your pen down as a promoter. You're kind of, it's easy to get in your own bubble, because you're doing your thing, and your organization is what you're thinking about, obviously. Outside of that bubble, what are some of the other promotions, if any, that you've admired over the years, not just in New England, but anywhere?
Boy, I'm really fond of a kid named Todd Graham who runs Proving Ground. Very fond of him. I think he does a great job. I think he's really flying the flag of local wrestling better than anybody else. There's other companies that have a lot of maybe have been around for a long time, maybe have more notoriety, but I like Proving Ground a lot. I think that kid is really doing some terrific things. He's very creative. I'd go out of my way to support them if I were them. He's one. There's Outcast Wrestling Revolution in Connecticut, Wrestling with Character, who's Kurt's company down there. He's doing some pretty interesting things. So there's a few that I kind of follow from afar or occasionally up close that I think are doing some great things. And I wish them all the best of success. And, when they call me and ask me for advice, I'm always willing to give it. That's another cool thing is I've had a few people like Todd and Kurt and so forth, people calling me and asking me, for advice, and I really appreciate that. And I'm always happy to lend a hand if I can.
And you were inducted into the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame 2009 in Rhode Island. Kind of take us back to that night briefly, and any memories from that evening.
Wow! First of all, thank you for that. A great honor, and boy, it's almost a blur because I remember, what am I going to say? What am I going to talk about? I was still in the process of doing things. I've decided to write an autobiography, Joe, because I think I've reached a point in my life where I have enough to look back on, that there's something to tell. But at the time that I was inducted in the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, I knew my story hadn't concluded yet, that we were still, I was still doing things and trying to accomplish things. So as much as I was honored and thrilled to be inducted, I still felt there was more to do. I think if I was being inducted now, I'd have a lot more to say and a lot more to add to the conversation, simply because I had a chance to accomplish more. So it was the highlight of my life. I'm very grateful for it. And again, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for that.
Well deserved, without a doubt. And in closing, when it comes to your legacy, how would you like to be remembered?
I'd like to be remembered as a guy that did a lot of things, not just for himself, but for other people. I helped a lot of people in their careers, some of whom had very significant careers. I played a role in a lot of different things in wrestling. I had a chance to really uh, do and be around a lot, and had one of the most varied and comprehensive careers of anyone in independent wrestling. From being on the board of directors of the Cauliflower Alley Club to working with someone like the late great Boston Bad Boy Tony Rumble, to brokering deals like Michinoku Pro and ECW, and later in WWF. I've had a chance to be on the scene in so many different things, and now as an author, it just I'm so fortunate to have been able to have done all the things that I've done. I just feel a lot of times like the luckiest man in the world. So and hopefully, please God, I've got one or two more things left up my sleeve to accomplish.
Well, Sheldon, thank you so much for joining us here on the All Access Entertainment Podcast. It's been my pleasure.
Joe, it's been my pleasure as well. Always a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for everything that you've done for wrestling in New England and for your friendship all these years. I deeply appreciate
thank you.
it.
That means a lot. For Sheldon Goldberg, I'm Joseph Bruen. This has been the All Access Entertainment Podcast. Don't forget to like, subscribe to our page, and we'll see you next time.